523 days. That's how long Sofia Rossi had been watching Leo Mancini reject women at Onyx without knowing he owned the entire building she worked in. And tonight, when he grabbed her water bottle off the bar and drank from it like it belonged to him before calling her amore in front of Rome's elite, every single person in that VIP section stopped breathing. But to understand how a waitress who couldn't afford new shoes ended up wearing an Italian billionaire's engagement ring, you need to go back 3 hours to when she thought he was just another beautiful, untouchable customer who'd never look at someone like her twice. What happened next would make even the coldest hearts in Rome believe in fate. 3 hours earlier, Sofia's reflection in Onyx's employee bathroom mirror looked tired. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from working 3 jobs while putting herself through Sapienza, and her best friend Maria's voice echoed from the stall behind her talking about some guy from the finance department she'd been texting for 2 months now. Someone named Enzo who'd finally asked her out and insisted on bringing his roommate so it wouldn't be awkward. And Sofia just wanted to finish her shift and collapse into bed. But Maria had that pleading tone that meant she wasn't taking no for an answer. Come on, Sofia. You can't let me face his roommate alone. What if he's weird? Maria emerged, reapplying lipstick that cost more than Sofia made in tips tonight. Besides, when's the last time you did something fun? You're 22, not 82. Sofia sighed because Maria was right. Her life had become work-ass-sleep-repeat, an endless cycle of survival that left no room for the kind of adventures her classmates took for granted. The kind of life where you could say yes to last-minute plans without checking your bank account first. Fine, but I'm not getting dolled up. I don't have time. Maria's grin could have lit up Piazza Navona. Deal. Now. Let's get back out there before Marco notices we're both gone. The VIP section of Onyx hummed with the kind of energy that came from people who'd never worried about rent. All designer labels and trust funds and the casual arrogance of those born into wealth. And Sofia moved through it like a ghost, invisible in her simple black server's uniform, carrying champagne that cost more than her monthly student loan payment to people who barely registered her existence. She'd been working here for 18 months, ever since she desperately needed a job that paid well enough to cover tuition after her scholarship didn't stretch far enough. And she learned early that the trick to surviving spaces like this was making yourself small, forgettable, just another part of the scenery that rich people used without seeing. But there was one person she'd never quite managed to stop seeing. Leo Mancini. Even now, across the room, he sat in the corner booth like a king holding court. And Sofia's traitorous heart wanted that stupid flutter thing it had been doing since the first night she'd served him 17 months ago, back when she'd thought maybe he'd smile at her the way he smiled at the models and heiresses who threw themselves at him. She'd learned better since then, watched him reject woman after woman with the same polite disinterest, watched him never date anyone longer than a month, watched him exist in a world so far removed from hers that crushing on him was like crushing on a movie star. Pointless and pathetic, and something she really needed. So get over. Table 7 needs another bottle of Dom. Marco, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow, and Sofia nodded, grateful for the distraction from her own stupidity. She just grabbed the champagne when she heard it. That voice that always made her pulse spike, even though she trained herself not to react. No thank you, Leo. Mancini's tone was courteous but final, directed at yet another woman in a dress that probably cost more than Sofia's car. Some socialite with perfect hair and practiced charm who clearly thought, and it never was. Sofia had watched this scene play out dozens of times. The rejection delivered with such cold efficiency that she almost felt sorry for these women who thought their beauty or connections or family names would be enough. Almost. Because part of her, the small petty part she wasn't proud of, was glad that none of them could have him either. That if she couldn't reach the stars, at least they were equally out of reach for everyone else. She was so busy not watching him that she didn't notice when her water bottle, the one she'd left on the service station, disappeared. Didn't notice until she heard the collective gasp that rippled through the VIP section like a shockwave. Didn't notice until she turned and saw him. Leo Mancini drinking from her bottle, the one with her name written in Sharpie on the side. His eyes locked on hers across 20 feet of suddenly silent room. If you've made it this far, you already know something's about to change. Hit that like button. Drop a subscribe. Because trust me when I tell you, this story is just getting started. And what happens when a man who's rejected 500 women finally finds the one he can't let go of? You'll want to be here for every second. Now, back to the moment everything shifted. Time moved differently in that moment, stretched and warped like honey dripping from a spoon. And Sophia's entire body went hot, then cold, then hot again as Leo Mancini lowered her water bottle from his lips, his throat working as he swallowed, his eyes never leaving hers with an intensity that made her feel like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The woman who'd been trying to get his attention stood frozen mid-sentence, her mouth still open on whatever pitch she'd been making. And around them, the entire VIP section had gone silent, phones out recording, because apparently watching Leo Mancini do anything was content worth capturing. But this was something unprecedented. He'd just drunk from a waitress's water bottle in front of everyone like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Excuse me." His voice cut through the silence, smooth and deep and directed entirely at Sophia. "I believe this is yours." He held out the bottle, and she stood there like an idiot. Tray still balanced on one hand, brain completely offline because what the hell was happening? And why? Was he looking at her like that, like she was something rare and precious instead of just the girl who brought him drinks? Her voice came out strangled. "That's okay. You can keep it. I have come here." It wasn't a request. Sophia's legs moved before her brain caught up, carrying her across those 20 feet, while every eye in the room tracked her movement. And she was acutely aware of her scuffed shoes and her unpainted nails, and the way her uniform hung loose, because she'd lost weight from skipping meals to save money. Aware of how, completely, she didn't belong in this moment with this man, who probably had women writing him love letters in their own blood. She stopped 2 feet away, close, enough to smell his cologne. Something expensive and cedar dark that made her head swim. "You dropped this," he said, even though they both knew she hadn't, even though her water bottle had been safely on the service station until he'd taken it. "Thank you," she managed, reaching for it, and when their fingers brushed, the shock of contact went straight through her like lightning. His hand closed around hers, holding her there. "What's your name?" "You know my name." The words escaped before she could stop them. "It's on the bottle." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or challenge. "Sophia." The way he said, yet like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth. The way he tasted her, water. Pretty name for a pretty girl. Behind them, someone made a choking sound and Sophia became aware again of their audience. Phones pointed at them, like weapons, the way this moment would probably be all over social media before she even finished her shift. "I need to get back to work," she said, trying to pull away. But his grip tightened, just slightly. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to keep her there. "Are you seeing anyone?" The question landed like a bomb. Sophia's brain short-circuited because Leo Mancini, the Leo Mancini who rejected heiresses and models and women who looked like they'd stepped off magazine covers, was asking her. Sophia Rossi, who bought her work shoes from a thrift store, if she was seeing anyone. No, but good. He released her hand, reached into his jacket, pulled out a business card that probably cost more than her entire outfit. "Text me when your shift ends. I'll take you home." This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Mr. Mancini, I don't think Leo." He corrected. And the intimacy of it, the way he insisted she use his first name in front of all these people who probably called him Signore, made something flutter dangerously in her chest. "And I'm not asking, Sophia. I'm telling you, text me." Then he did something that would later become the most viral clip of the night. He lifted her water bottle to his lips again, eyes locked on hers, and took another long drink before setting it deliberately in her hand, his fingers lingering against hers for just a beat too long. "See you soon, amor." The pet name dropped into the silence like a stone in distilled water, and the breath ripples spread outward in waves of gasps and whispers and furious typing as every phone in the room lit up with people sharing what they just witnessed. Sophia stood there frozen, water bottle clutched to her chest like a shield, while Leo Mancini settled back into his seat like he hadn't just upended her entire the world in the span of 3 minutes. And as she stumbled back to the service station, on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, as Maria grabbed her arm, with wide eyes and 100 questions as her phone started buzzing with notifications from people tagging her in posts she didn't even know existed yet, one thought burned through the shock and confusion and disbelief. He'd called her Maury in front of everyone like she belonged to him. What the hell had just happened? The rest of Sophia's shift passed in a blur of whispers and stares, and Maria, practically vibrating with barely contained excitement, every time they crossed paths. And Sophia kept her head down, focused on her work, tried to ignore the the way her hands shook every time she had to enter the VIP section where Leo Mancini still sat now, surrounded by men in expensive suits, who kept glancing her way with expressions ranging from amused to stunned. "Did you text him yet?" Maria cornered her in the employee bathroom at midnight, eyes wild with the kind of manic energy that came from witnessing what she clearly considered the romance of the century. "Did you seriously just ask me that?" Sophia was washing champagne residue off her hands, avoiding her own reflection because she didn't want to see whatever desperate hope might be showing on her face. "Maria, that was, I don't know what that was, but it wasn't. He doesn't actually want to take me home. He was probably just what? Publicly claiming you in front of half of Rome's elite for fun?" Maria grabbed her shoulders, spun her around, forced her to meet her eyes. "Sophia, I've worked here almost as long as you have, and I have never, not once, seen Leo Mancini look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight. Whatever just happened, it was real. But that was the problem, wasn't it?" Because Sophia had learned young that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. That girls like her didn't end up with guys like him. That fairy tales were called fairy tales because they weren't real. She'd watched her mother work 3 jobs and still lose their apartment, watched her scholarship almost disappear because the system was rigged against people who started with nothing, learned that hope was dangerous, that letting yourself believe in magic was just setting yourself up for a harder fall, when reality inevitably reasserted itself. "I'm not texting him," she said firmly, even as her fingers hitched to pull out her phone to see if maybe, just possibly, this could be something. "I'm going home. I'm going to sleep. And tomorrow, this will all be some weird fever dream that got blown out of proportion by social media." Maria's expression shifted from excitement to something gentler, sadder. "Or," she said softly, "tomorrow you could wake up and realize you let fear rob you of something that might have been amazing." The words hit harder than they should have. Sophia pulled away, grabbed her bag from her locker, tried to ignore the proscent business card burning a hole in her pocket. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said, and fled before Maria could say anything else that might crack the careful walls she'd spent years building around her heart. The November air bit cold against her face when she exited through the employee entrance into the alley behind Onyx, and Sophia pulled her thin jacket tighter, mentally calculating whether she had enough in her account for a cab, or if she'd be taking the Metropolitana again at this hour, weighing safety against money, the way she did every night. She was so absorbed in her mental math that she didn't notice the car idling at the mouth of the alley, until a door opened and a man stepped out and her heart jumped into her throat because Rome, at 1 a.m., was dangerous for women alone. But then the interior light illuminated his face, and her heart stopped for an entirely different reason. Leo Mancini standing there in the alley like he'd been waiting. "I told you to text me," he said. No accusation in his tone, just statement of fact. And Sophia's brain finally rebooted enough to process that he was here, that he'd actually waited, that whatever was happening was apparently still happening. I was going to take the Metropolitana, she heard herself say, which was possibly the stupidest response to this situation. But her mouth was operating independently of her brain at this point. Something dark flashed across his face. The Metropolitana? At 1 in the morning? He moved closer and Sophia's back hit the brick wall behind her, not because she was retreating, but because her legs had forgotten how to hold her upright. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? I do it every night. She shot back, finding some spark of defiance in his presumption. I've been taking care of myself for a long time, Mr. Mancini. I don't need Leo. He cut her off. And suddenly, he was right there, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that his proximity made her forget every word in the Italian language. And you're right, you don't need me, but I'm asking you to let me take you home anyway. Please. The please did it, that single word offered like a gift. Like he was the one asking for a favor, instead of offering one. Like her answer mattered. Sophia's carefully constructed defenses crumbled like sand. Okay, she whispered, and the smile that broke across his face was worth every risk she was taking, every warning bell clanging in her head. Come on. He held out his hand. And when she took it, when their fingers laced together like they'd done this 1,000 times before, something clicked into place in Sophia's chest that felt dangerously close to fate. The interior of Leo's car was warm and leather-scented, and so far removed from Sophia's normal reality that she felt like she'd stepped through a portal into someone else's life. And the driver, a man who introduced himself simply as Vittorio, pulled smoothly into Roman traffic while Leo kept her hand clasped in, his thumb drawing slow circles on her pulse point that made it impossible to think straight. Where do you live? His voice was lower in the enclosed space, intimate, and Sophia's face heated because she was about to give him an address. In a neighborhood that made people lock their car doors at red lights. Garbatella, she admitted, watching for the flicker of judgment or distaste that usually followed. But his expression didn't change. That's over an hour. From Onyx. You make that commute every night? 3 times a week, she said, defensive without meaning to be. It's not that bad. I study on the train and the rent is cheap enough that I can actually afford. She stopped, swallowed, because she was about to say, afford to eat. And that felt like too much truth, too fast. But Leo's fingers tightened on hers, cheap enough that you can afford. What? When she didn't answer, he made a sound low in his throat that might have been frustration or anger or something else entirely. Sophia, look at me. She did. And the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. I want to know everything about you. The real stuff, not whatever polite version you think I want to hear. So she told him. Didn't know why. Maybe because the darkness and the leather seats and his hand warm in hers made it feel safe, like confessions, whispered at midnight didn't count in daylight. Told him about Sapienza and her, scholarships that weren't quite enough, and her 3 jobs, and the way she'd learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and instant pasta. Told him about her mother who'd worked herself to death trying to give Sophia a better life. About being alone since she was 19. About the constant calculation of survival that colored every decision she made. And he listened, really listened. Didn't interrupt or offer platitudes or try to fix anything. Just held her hand and listened like her story mattered. Like she mattered. And by the time Vittorio pulled up in front of her building, Sophia felt cracked open in a way that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. This is me, she said unnecessarily, because her building was obviously the most run down on a block that wasn't winning any beauty contests. And she waited for reality to reassert itself, for Leo to see the gulf between their worlds and remember why this was insane. But, instead, he got out of the car, walked her to her door, waited while she fumbled, with keys that stuck in a lock that needed WD-40 she couldn't afford. Leo. She turned before going inside. Needed to say something to acknowledge the impossibility of this. Tonight was. I don't know what tonight was, but you don't have to. I mean, I know this isn't Sophia. He stepped closer, backed her gently against the door, braced one hand beside her head in a move that should have felt threatening, but instead felt protective, sheltering. Let me be very clear about something. I didn't drink your water and call you amore, a front of half of Rome because I was bored. I didn't wait in an alley for an hour because I felt sorry for you. And I'm not standing here right now because I'm confused about what I want. His other hand came up to cup her face, thumb, brushing her cheekbone with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. I've been watching you for 17 months. Why you work 3 jobs and still smile at rude customers. Watched you give your tips to the busboy when his kid was sick. Watched you exist in my world like you were invisible when you're the only person I've been able to see. Sophia's breath caught because that couldn't be true. He couldn't have been watching her. She would have noticed. Would have felt it. But you never even looked at me before tonight. Amore, the pet name again. Softer this time. Devastating. I looked. You just never looked back. And then he was kissing her, gentle and sure, and tasting like whiskey and promises. And Sophia's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, kissing him back with 17 months of pent-up longing that she hadn't let herself acknowledge until this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Can I see you tomorrow? Tomorrow? The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. I have class until 3. Then I work at the coffee shop in Trastevere until 7. I'll pick you up at 7. We'll have dinner. It wasn't a question, but Sophia found she didn't mind. Okay. One more kiss. Quick and sweet. And then he was walking back to his car, and Sophia was floating up 4 flights of stairs to her tiny studio. And the whole world felt different, brighter, like something had shifted fundamentally in the universe. Sophia woke up to her phone exploding with notifications, hundreds of them, Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, all lighting up with the same video from a dozen different angles. And there she was, frozen in digital eternity, standing in Onyx's VIP section, while Leo Mancini drank from her water bottle and called her amore in front of everyone. The comments were a war zone split between people calling it the most romantic thing they'd ever seen, and people calling her a gold digger, a nobody, asking who the hell she thought she was, and Sophia's stomach twisted because she'd known this was coming, had known that stepping into Leo's spotlight would mean stepping into public judgment. But knowing and experiencing were very different things. Girl, you're famous. Maria's text came through with 16 fire emojis. Everyone's trying to figure out who you are. Don't read the comments. Half of them are just jealous. I'll see. To you tonight at work. Tell me everything. But Sophia had already made the mistake of reading the comments, had already seen herself picked apart by strangers who knew nothing about her, but felt entitled to opinions on everything from her appearance to her worth to whether she deserved whatever was happening with Leo. One comment in particular stuck like a knife between her ribs. He's probably just slumming. Give it a week before he's back to dating actual quality women. Quality women. Like Sophia was defective merchandise. Like her bank account determined her value as a human being. She was still staring at her phone, feeling sick when a text came through from an unknown number. Good morning, amor. Ignore the noise. See you at 7, Leo. The presumption that he could read her mind should have annoyed her. Instead, it steadied something inside her chest. He knew. Of course, he knew. He lived in this world of constant scrutiny and commentary, and he was telling her to ignore it. Easier said than done. But Sophia took a breath, put her phone down, and focused on getting ready for class, because whatever else was happening, she still had a degree to finish, and bills to pay, and a life that existed outside of one surreal night at Onyx. Sapienza's campus was beautiful in November, all autumn leaves and Gothic architecture. And Sophia usually loved this walk. But today, She felt hyper-aware of people's eyes on her, of whispered conversations that stopped when she passed, and she didn't know if she was being paranoid, or if people actually recognized her from the videos. Sophia, a voice called across the quad, and she turned to see Eduardo Rossi jogging toward her, one of her classmates from advanced economics, a nice guy who'd borrowed her notes a few times. "Hey, I saw the videos. That was wild. Is it true you're dating Leo Mancini?" The question landed like a punch because she didn't know the answer. Were they dating? One kiss didn't make them dating. One dinner invitation didn't erase the vast gulf between their worlds. "It's complicated," she said finally, and Eduardo grinned. "That's what everyone in a relationship says when they don't want to jinx it. Good for you, Sophia. Don't let the haters get to you." He jogged off before she could respond, and Sophia stood there wondering when her life had become something people had opinions about, when she'd become visible instead of invisible, and whether she was ready for what that meant. Class was a blur. Professor Bianchi's lecture on market equilibrium washed over her while her mind replayed last night on loop. The feel of Leo's hand in hers, the way he'd listened to her story like it mattered. The kiss that had rewired something fundamental in her brain chemistry. By the time she got to the coffee shop in Trastevere for her afternoon shift, Sophia felt like she'd lived 3 days in the span of 12 hours. Well, Rosa, her manager, and the closest thing she had to a mother figure in Rome looked up from inventory with a knowing smile. "If it isn't Rome's newest celebrity, I saw the videos. Mija, that man looked at you like you hung the moon." "Rosa, it's not. We're not. Don't tell me it's nothing. I've worked in this city 30 years, served coffee to everyone from Wall Street brokers to Broadway stars, and I know what real looks like versus what's for show." Rosa came around the counter, pulled Sophia into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and safety. "That was real, baby girl. Question is, are you going to let yourself believe it?" Sophia didn't have an answer. Spent her shift making lattes and taking orders and trying not to check her phone every 5 minutes. Trying not to think about Seven and what it would mean when Leo picked her up, when this thing between them moved from one surreal night to something sustained. Something that might actually be happening. At 6:50, she was in the employee bathroom changing out of her coffee-stained apron, putting on the nicest sweater she owned, which wasn't saying much, when her phone buzzed. "I'm outside." Her heart kicked into overdrive. This was it. Decision point. She could walk out there and see where this went. Could let herself hope and risk and maybe fall. Or she could text him some excuse. Could protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak when reality caught up to fairy tale. Sophia looked at her reflection. Saw a girl who'd survived everything life threw at her. Saw someone who'd earned the right to take a chance on something beautiful, even if it scared her. Saw possibility. She walked outside. Leo was leaning against a car that probably cost more than Sophia would earn in 5 years. And when he saw her, his whole face transformed, lit up like she was something precious. And Sophia's careful defenses crumbled like paper in rain, because how was she supposed to protect herself against someone who looked at her like that? "Hi," she managed, and he closed the distance between them, in 3 strides, pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home, pressed his lips to her temple in a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. "Hi, amore. Hungry?" They ended up at a small Italian place in Testaccio. Not the kind of flashy restaurant Sophia had expected, but something intimate and warm, where the owner greeted Leo by name and led them to a corner booth with flickering candlelight and privacy. "You come here often?" Sophia asked as they settled in, and Leo's smile was almost shy. "My mom used to bring me here when I was a kid, before she passed. It's the only place in the city that feels like home." And, just like that, he'd shared something real, something that matched her vulnerability from last night. And Sophia felt the last of her walls start to crumble. They talked through dinner, really talked about his family and the pressure of expectations and the loneliness of never knowing if people wanted in him or his money, and about her dreams and fears, And the way she was terrified, that wanting something this much meant she was setting herself up for devastation. What if this doesn't work? She asked finally, pushing pasta around her plate. What if the whole world is right, and we're too different, and this was just, I don't know, temporary insanity, brought on by good lighting and champagne fumes? Leo reached across the table, laced his fingers through hers. Then we deal with it together. But Sophia, I've spent my whole life playing it, safe, keeping people at arm's length, never letting anyone close enough to matter. And you know what that got me? Nothing. Emptiness until you. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. I'm not saying this will be easy. I'm not saying people won't judge or that my world won't try to chew you up and spit you out, but I'm saying I want to try. I want you. However I can have you. For however long you'll let me. Sophia's eyes burned. I'm scared. Me too, he admitted. And the honesty of it, the fact that he wasn't pretending to be invincible, made her love him a little bit right there in that moment. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. They were walking back to his car, hands linked, when everything went wrong. A woman stepped out of the shadows, expensive coat and cold eyes, and Sophia recognized her from the videos last night. One of the women Leo had rejected at Onyx. Leo, darling, fancy seeing you here. Her smile was sharp as knives. And, with your little charity case. How progressive of you. Leo's entire body went rigid. Vanessa, walk away. Why? Afraid she'll figure out this is just your latest game? Everyone knows you don't do commitment, sweetie. You're the king of the 1-month special. What makes her think she's different? Each word landed like a blow, and Sophia felt something cold settle in her stomach. Because what if she was right? What if this was just Leo's pattern? The thrill of the chase, and once he had her, he'd move on like he always did. Sophia. Leo turned to her, desperation in his eyes. Don't listen to her. She's just telling the truth. Vanessa's laugh was cruel. Ask him, sweetheart. Ask him how many women he said pretty words to before getting bored. Ask him what makes you special, besides being a fun little walk on the poor side. Enough. Leo's voice cracked like a whip, and when he looked at Vanessa, there was something dangerous in his cries de glace expression that made even her step back. You want to know what makes her special? She's the first person in my entire life who looked at me and saw Leo instead of my last name and my bank account. She's genuine and kind and brilliant. And she survived things that would break most people. And yeah, I've dated a lot of women, but I never called any of them amore. Never took them to my mother's favorite restaurant. Never felt like I'd found something worth fighting for until her. He turned back to Sophia, cupped her face in both hands. I know my track record isn't great. I know you have every reason not to trust this. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that you're different, that this is different. Please. Sophia looked into his eyes and saw fear, hope, and something that looked dangerously like love. And she made a choice, made a leap. Okay, she whispered, one chance. The kiss he gave her was gratitude and promise and claim all rolled into one. And when they finally broke apart, Vanessa was gone. And it was just them, together, figuring out how to build something real in a world that wanted to tear them apart. Come home with me, Leo said against her lips. Not for. I don't want to let you go. Yet. So Sophia went to his penthouse in Rome that was bigger than her entire building. Went to his balcony that overlooked the city like a kingdom. Went into his arms like that's where she belonged. And when he held her close and whispered, mine, into her hair, she whispered back, yours, and meant it. The next morning, Sophia woke up in Leo's shirt on his couch, where they'd fallen, asleep talking, and her phone was full of new notifications. But this time, when she opened social media, the narrative had shifted. Someone had posted Leo's speech from last night, his defense of her, and the comments were different now, softer. People talking about true love and giving them a chance and how they were rooting for the fairy tale. Maria had sent 47 texts, all variations of oh my God. And there was one from Leo. Even though he was in the kitchen making coffee, even though she could hear him humming, even though this was real and happening and terrifying and wonderful. Good morning, Amore. Thank you for taking a chance on me. I promise I won't waste it. P.S. I make terrible coffee, but I'm trying to impress you. Please lie and say it's good. Sophia laughed, actually laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years, and when she walked into the kitchen and saw him there, sleep rumpled and vulnerable and trying so hard with his terrible coffee, she knew this was it. This was the fairy tale she'd stopped believing in. The coffee is perfect. She lied and kissed him and tasted forever on his lips, because sometimes the stars did fall. Sometimes the impossible happened. Sometimes a girl from Garbatella and a boy from Rome found each other across a crowded room, and every rule about how the world worked rewrote itself. 17 months of watching, one bottle of water, one word, amore, everything changed. If this story made you believe in second chances and first loves and the kind of fate that doesn't care about zip codes or bank accounts, show some love with that like button and subscribe, because Sophia and Leo's story, this is just the beginning. Trust me when I say their happy ending is going to be worth every moment you spent here. Thank you for being part of their journey. Now go out there and take your own chance on something beautiful. You deserve it.